"Oh dear, Emily, it looks like I left my wallet at home. And my cards, too." Her mother, Samantha, said with a mischievous smile, her eyes filled with expectation. Her father, Jacob, joined in, and their cheerful laughter echoed through the luxurious restaurant where the family had gathered for a grand dinner. When the astonishing bill of $2,000 arrived, their laughter grew even louder, as if the absurdity of the situation were an inside joke. But when Emily sat quietly at the table, their cheerfulness abruptly halted. Her voice, filled with quiet determination, sliced through the noise like a blade. Emily had worked desperately not just for success. There had always been a fragile, flickering hope of reclaiming the warmth, unity, and mutual support that she had longed for in her childhood. Her own childhood had been a patchwork of unfairness. Her parents had doted on her older sister, Olivia, always putting Emily second. They could never provide the sense of security and unconditional love she craved. To Emily, Olivia had always seemed like an innocent soul needing guidance, with her free-spirited demeanor and apparent inability to navigate life's complexities. Emily saw in her sister a certain immaturity, a childlike nature that stirred her protective instincts. Having grown accustomed to suppressing her own needs from a young age, Emily believed she could support her sister and keep the family together. She accepted that role with quiet resolve. When Emily entered the workforce and began gaining financial independence, things initially looked promising. Though Olivia had a dependent nature, Emily felt her love was genuine, even if tinged with a sort of immaturity. Olivia frequently cried to their mother, Samantha, over everything from work troubles to trivial shopping decisions, which often led to Emily being asked to help. At first, Emily took this as a sign of a strong family bond and even found it endearing. She hoped that, with time, her sister would grow into a more independent woman, able to stand on her own. She told herself that Olivia's clinginess toward Samantha was just a phase that would fade with maturity. But reality soon painted a different picture. It became painfully clear that Emily's financial stability far surpassed that of her sister, Olivia. Olivia had no steady job, bouncing between part-time gigs under the guise of chasing dreams, earning barely enough for a modest life. Yet she squandered most of it on her desires, designer handbags, frequent overseas trips, and the latest luxury gadgets that briefly shone before being replaced by newer models. In stark contrast, Emily held an esteemed position as a finance director at a prominent company. Her income was considerable, and her meticulous approach to money ensured her own life remained stable. She took pride in her ability to plan, save, and invest wisely, skills honed through years of independence. As Emily's income grew, her parents, Samantha and Jacob, made it a habit to organize lavish family gatherings. At first, they were intimate dinners, filled with laughter and shared stories. But over time, the events became more extravagant. Birthdays turned into grand spectacles. Anniversaries evolved into lavish celebrations. Even minor milestones called for gatherings that rivaled society galas. Relatives, friends, and even distant acquaintances filled the guest lists. Tables groaned under gourmet dishes. Venues were always upscale restaurants or banquet halls, reflecting a taste in luxury that Emily realized she was expected to fund. Samantha had a special talent for dropping subtle yet pointed hints. "Well, Emily, you really are so dependable," she would say with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Olivia is hopeless with these kinds of things, but you're such a smart girl." Her words were full of praise, but the intent was clear. Emily was expected to pay the bill. And Olivia? She showed no resistance. She nodded at their mother's suggestion, her silence signaling an unspoken agreement that this was simply how things worked. "Emily's got the money, so why not? We're family, right?" She shrugged as she spoke, oblivious to the weight of her words. To her, it was a practical arrangement, not an unfair burden placed on her sister's shoulders. At first, Emily complied without protest. She wanted to be the ideal daughter, the perfect sister who supported her family. She yearned for their approval, a sense of belonging she had never fully received growing up. She bought lavish gifts for her parents and sister, designer handbags for Samantha, a sleek watch for Jacob. She planned elaborate celebrations, ensuring every detail was perfect. Even when the restaurant bills reached tens of thousands, she paid without flinching. To her, these were sacrifices worth making for family harmony, a small price to pay for the love and acceptance she so desperately sought. But the cost began to rise both financially and emotionally. Her family's demands became insatiable. Luxury resort vacations, custom furniture for her parents' house, the latest home appliances, a complete renovation of the family home, all funded by Emily's income. She watched her savings dwindle, her personal dreams delayed. She stopped buying new clothes, skipped her own vacations, and cut back on small pleasures, like dining out with friends, all to meet the ever-growing expectations of her family. But no matter how much she gave, it was never enough. Samantha's requests grew bolder, cloaked in feigned concern for Olivia. "You don't want Olivia to feel miserable, do you?" Or, "This is for the family, Emily. You understand, right?" Emily felt a slow burning resentment take root. She worked grueling hours, her days filled with high-stakes meetings and complex financial strategies. And yet her earnings were being siphoned to fund a lifestyle she had not chosen. She began to feel like a stranger in her own life. Her identity had been reduced to that of a provider, a role she had never agreed to. Memories from childhood floated up like unwelcome guests. Her mother's words, always prioritizing her sister, the willful absence of her father who chose to look away, the heavy burden of endurance Emily had carried since she was a girl. She had once vowed to build a different life, one filled with love and mutual respect. Instead, she realized she was trapped in a cycle of obligation. Her efforts were unacknowledged, her sacrifices overlooked. The turning point came when Samantha approached her with yet another request. "Emily, my back is just unbearable lately," she moaned in a voice steeped in rehearsed sorrow. "The doctor says I need therapy at a spa. A proper one, for my health. But Jacob and I, we simply can't afford it on our pensions. You understand, don't you?" Emily silently handed over her credit card and paid the cost, feeling a surge of anger rise within her. The act was mechanical, but inside she was breaking. This was no longer just about money. It was about dignity, about fairness, about her right to her own life. She could no longer ignore the truth. She was being exploited, and her silence had enabled it. Her grandmother's words rang sharply and resolutely in her mind. "Don't let anyone ride on your back, young lady, or you'll carry their weight for the rest of your life." Her grandmother had been a fiercely independent woman, her wisdom forged through hardship. Emily wished she had listened sooner. But now, with Samantha's 60th birthday celebration approaching, she knew the time for change had come. She could no longer live as a bystander in her own story. Even if it meant risking the fragile bonds she had tried so desperately to preserve, she was determined to end the financial exploitation and reclaim her autonomy. Emily meticulously planned her next steps. The grand birthday event orchestrated by Samantha would be the stage for her resistance. She knew her actions would stir anger, might even tear the family apart. But she was ready. She spent several days gathering evidence. Every receipt, every bank statement, every bill documenting her contributions to the family. She compiled them into a folder, a tangible record of her sacrifices. She wasn't seeking revenge. She wanted clarity, for herself and for them. She wanted to speak truths she had buried for far too long. On the day of the celebration, Emily arrived at the restaurant with a calmness that masked the storm within. The venue was the epitome of elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with fresh flowers and flickering candles. The air was rich with the aroma of roasted meats, fine wine, and decadent desserts. Guests mingled, their laughter blending with the soft strains of a string quartet. Samantha, radiant in a tailored dress, held court at the head of the table, beaming as she received compliments and gifts. Jacob sat beside her, the ever-quiet partner, his expression one of modest satisfaction. Olivia, seated next to Emily, shifted uneasily, as if sensing the tension radiating from her sister. Emily sat composed, her face a mask of serenity. But within her churned anger, fear, resolve, and a quiet sorrow for the family she had tried to build. She felt like an outsider watching the celebration unfold behind a pane of glass. The smiling guests, the clinking glasses, the heartfelt toasts. It all felt hollow. A performance she could no longer sustain. For too long, she had played the role of the good daughter, and the weight of it was crushing her. As the evening wore on, the guests raised their glasses, offering heartfelt wishes for Jacob and Samantha's health and happiness. Samantha basked in the attention, delivering a speech brimming with self-satisfaction as she spoke of sacrifices and the love her family had shown her. Jacob nodded quietly, watching her shine with quiet pride. Olivia also raised a toast, expressing gratitude for their parents' guidance and love. Emily listened, her heart heavy with bitter irony. To her, Olivia's words rang false, reflecting a world where Emily's contributions were invisible, her role reduced to that of a silent supporter. The meal reached its peak. Waiters glided between tables with platters of exquisitely arranged dishes. Guests savored every bite, their conversations bubbling with gossip and laughter. Samantha, ever the performer, captivated the crowd with stories of her travels, her latest purchases, and her connections with influential figures. Emily sat in silence, her plate untouched, her mind racing. She felt the moment drawing near. The point of no return. When the bill arrived, the waiter discreetly placed it before Samantha. She glanced at it with practiced indifference and, as expected, turned to Emily with a saccharine smile. "Oh, Emily, you'll cover this, won't you?" As always, the words hung in the air, waited with expectation. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Emily. The guests, so used to her quiet compliance, waited. But this time, Emily did not reach for her wallet. Instead, she met Samantha's gaze with unwavering, unflinching eyes. There was no fear in them. No hesitation. There was only a tired resolve left. Slowly, she reached for the box filled with envelopes of gifts brought by the guests for the guest of honor. She opened it and began to count the cash inside. Her voice was calm but deliberate. "There's $2,500 here." Her words rang clearly in the silent room. "That should be enough to cover the bill." Then, with composed grace, she pulled a thick folder from her bag. It was the documentation she had carefully prepared. "And this," she said, holding it up for all to see, "is a small bonus for your 60th birthday, Mom." She opened the folder, revealing a meticulously organized collection of documents. Receipts, bank statements, invoices. Each was evidence of the financial burdens she had shouldered. "This is everything I've spent on you, as a family, over the past year." She continued flipping through the pages. Groceries, utilities, car repairs, gifts, vacations, entertainment, every luxury you enjoyed was paid for with my money. The room was blanketed in stunned silence. The guests stared, wide-eyed or squirming in discomfort, as the weight of her words settled over them. Samantha's face turned a deep shade of crimson, her expression a mix of anger and humiliation. Olivia sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, unable to process the scene unfolding before her. Jacob looked away, his hands clasped tightly in his lap, as if wishing to disappear. Emily's voice remained steady, but her heart pounded furiously. "The total comes to nearly $100,000, she said with an unwavering tone. $100,000, earned through my hard work, spent for your pleasure. Without a single moment's thought of what it cost me, not just in money, but in time, in dreams, in my own happiness." She paused to let her words settle, scanning the faces of the guests. "Today, I'm done. I will no longer pay for your indulgences. I'm tired of being your money tree, your safety net. I want to live my own life, to pursue what brings me joy, and to spend my money on myself." Samantha sat rigid, her face like a stone mask. Jacob seemed to shrink deeper into his chair, his discomfort unmistakable. Olivia looked deflated, her eyes blinking rapidly as she struggled to make sense of the words. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the faint clink of glass as someone shifted uncomfortably. Emily rose from her seat, leaving her untouched dessert behind. She felt the weight of every gaze in the room but refused to waver. She had done what she came to do. The truth was out, exposed for all to see. Whatever came next, she would face it. Olivia snapped out of her daze and jumped up, nearly knocking over her wine glass. "Emily, what are you doing?" she said in a voice hoarse with shock. "Why would you air all of this in front of everyone?" Emily stopped and turned to face her sister. Her voice was gentle but steel lay beneath it. "Because this concerns everyone, Olivia. And I can't stay silent anymore." She saw the confusion in her sister's eyes, the bewilderment of someone unaccustomed to facing harsh truths. Olivia had always avoided problems, hiding behind their mother or Emily, expecting to be shielded from reality. But now, that reality had become undeniable, and she was unprepared. Samantha recovered, her face twisting in rage. "How dare you?" she spat, standing up with dramatic flair. "You've ruined my 60th birthday and humiliated us in front of our guests." Emily let out a weary but firm sigh. She had expected this reaction. Samantha would never accept responsibility, always redirecting blame. "I didn't come here to shame anyone," Emily answered, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I came here to speak the truth you've all ignored for far too long." Samantha scoffed with a sneer. "Your truth? You're just jealous of Olivia. Do you think we don't see how you resent her, how you're trying to pull her away from us?" Emily felt a wave of long-suppressed frustration and anger rising. She had endured countless slights, manipulations, and accusations. But now she would not be silenced. "I don't resent my sister," she said, locking eyes with Samantha. "I want her to stand on her own, to make her own choices, to earn her way, and take responsibility for her life. But you've kept her tethered, locked in a golden cage, and refused to let her grow into the adult she could be." Samantha raised her hand as if to strike her, but Olivia grabbed her wrist. "Mom, stop," she pleaded in a trembling voice. "Please, just stop." Samantha yanked her hand away and turned on her daughter with venom. "You weren't weak," she hissed. "You're like this because of Emily." Emily shook her head, a sad smile forming on her lips. "It's not because of me, Mom. It's because of you. You've controlled every aspect of her life, every decision, every step. You never gave her the chance to stand on her own." For the first time, Jacob broke his silence. His voice was soft but filled with resignation. "Samantha, maybe Emily's right," he said, his gaze fixed on the table. "Maybe we need to reflect on this." Samantha turned to him with a look of betrayal. "You've always been spineless," she snapped. "And now you're taking her side?" Jacob remained silent, his shoulders sagging. Emily felt a pang of sympathy for him. He, like she had been, was trapped in this dynamic. A quiet man, caught in the shadow of a dominating wife. She turned toward Olivia, who stood motionless with her head bowed. Emily could see the turmoil in her sister, the conflict between loyalty to their mother and the dawning understanding of truth. She knew this moment was painful for Olivia. But she also knew that Olivia would have to choose her own path. "I'm done paying for other people's pleasures," Emily said, her voice quieter now, but still firm. The words carried the weight of a final judgment. The once buzzing guests now avoided her gaze, their discomfort plain. The air was thick with tension, broken only by the occasional clink of cutlery or nervous cough. Everyone knew they had witnessed something profound, something that shattered the illusion of family bliss. Olivia stood speechless, her usual shelter under their mother's wing now gone. For the first time, she could neither hide nor deflect. She looked at Emily as if seeing her for the very first time, a woman transformed by her own strength. All these years, she had taken her sister for granted, seeing her as the dependable provider who always put family first, a selfless presence. Now, that illusion had shattered. Emily felt, even in her exhaustion, a sense of liberation, as if she had finally shed the heavy cloak that had suffocated her for so long. She cast one final glance at Olivia, searching for signs of the adult she had once hoped her sister would become. There was a glimmer of regret in her eyes, but it was too little, too late. "I'm leaving," she said softly, her voice echoing through the silent room. She offered no farewell, no explanation. Everything that needed to be said had already been revealed. She turned and walked toward the exit, her steps steady despite the weight of the moment. Behind her, she heard Samantha's outburst of rage, Olivia's stumbling response, and the murmurs of shocked guests. She did not look back. Stepping into the cool night air, Emily felt the pulse of the city around her. Cars roared, lights flickered, and life went on as if nothing had changed. But for her, everything had changed. This was the moment she stepped into a new chapter, one she would define on her own terms. Returning to her modest apartment, purchased with her own money, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. It was her sanctuary, untouched by Samantha's demands or Olivia's passivity. There were no traces of the flashy luxury her parents longed for, only the quiet comfort of things that were truly hers. Neatly stacked books, framed photos of moments that mattered to her, a life built on her own terms. She sank into her bed, exhausted but wide awake. The events of that night replayed in her mind. She thought of her childhood, of always being second to her sister, of her father's absence. She had dreamed of a family that would heal those wounds. Instead, she had fallen into another kind of trap. But now, she was free. The next morning, Emily awoke with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She contacted her lawyer to discuss the steps needed to legally refuse future financial demands from her family. She wanted the chance to cut ties and reclaim her life. Afterward, she called her office and requested a leave of absence. She needed time to heal, to rediscover herself, to chart a new course. Over the following weeks, Emily began the process of rebuilding her life. She reviewed her finances with care, redirecting her resources toward her own goals. She enrolled in yoga classes, finding solace in the rhythm of breath and movement. She swam laps at the local pool, letting the water wash away the residue of her past. She reconnected with old friends, whose laughter and support reminded her of who she was before she had become a sister, a daughter, a provider. It wasn't easy. Memories of Olivia lingered, moments of kindness, shared dreams, hopes for a family future. She wondered if she could have done more to save them, to change her sister. But every time she recalled the years of exploitation and the dismissal of her sacrifices, she knew she had made the right choice. A few weeks later, Emily returned to work with renewed energy. She immersed herself in projects, her confidence and passion earning the respect of colleagues and clients alike. She felt alive again, her days full of purpose and possibility. One evening, her phone rang. It was Olivia. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen, then answered. "Emily," she said in a soft voice tinged with guilt. "I need to apologize." Emily listened in silence. Her heart was a tangle of emotions. "I was wrong," her sister continued. "I was blind and foolish. I was controlled by Mom. I didn't see you. I didn't appreciate you. I'm truly sorry." For a moment, Emily felt a desperate longing to believe her sister could change. But too much had already been broken. "Olivia," she said gently, "I appreciate your words, but we've become too far apart. We want different things from life. I wish you the best." She ended the call and tears streamed down her face. Not for Olivia or their broken relationship, but for the dream of a family that never came true. Yet through the tears, she saw a new beginning. She was strong, capable, and free to shape her future. Samantha never accepted the loss of her financial lifeline. She tried to use Olivia to pull Emily back in, but Olivia had begun to see through her mother's tactics. She found a new job, moved into a modest apartment, and began therapy to confront her anxieties. She thought often of Emily, with regret. The sister she had lost. The friend she had pushed away. She held on to a faint hope that one day, as a better person, she might earn her sister's forgiveness. Jacob remained the quiet observer, silently relieved by Emily's decision. Though he never had the courage to challenge his wife, he had always sensed his daughter's unhappiness. Meanwhile, Emily thrived. She built a brilliant career, bought a new home, and surrounded herself with friends who valued her for who she was. Her heart remained open to love, but she knew it would come from someone who saw beyond her wallet. And if her path ever crossed with her family's again, it would be a new story. One written on her own terms.